Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies and the characters that make us feel seen. I have my guest with me today is one of the truly great minds, records, living encyclopedias, historians of cinema generally, genre cinema specifically. I have had the pleasure of making her acquaintance now for several years and have been hoping to have the excuse to have her on the show. You might know some of her literature that she has written, such as rape revenge films, masks in horror cinema, found footage horror films, a book titled Suspiria, The Cinema Coven. I could go on and on. There are so many books, there are so many DVD releases, including Kindergarten Cop, released by Kino Lorber. We can't leave that off in talking about the grand history of rape revenge films like Miss 45 that she's very well known for. Let's throw in Kindergarten Cop there too. And now she is the woman behind the documentary adapted from her book 1000 Women in Horror, Alexandra Heller-Nicholas. What else do people need to know about you before we get started in your breathlessly extensive resume?
Primarily that I love you and I'm so tickled to have this chat with you. Like that's the number one thing people need to know about me right now.
I know that you are a lecturer, you're an educator, you're a film communicator, writer, reviewer, so many things. I did see on your website there's a part where it's like, I'm not really doing podcasts right now, but like maybe I'll make it. I know you're on tour for promoting the documentary, but I still just wanted to go out of my way to thank you for doing another podcast with me.
Look, you're the exception that proves the rule, really. I actually left academia quite a while ago. I like to consider myself a recovering academic. So I
Hmm.
think as I'm getting older, writing is the space that I work the best in.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of doing less forward-facing stuff like podcasts and I haven't taught for a while. And
Mm.
thankfully I'm now out of universities, but I have like an honorary title, which is great, which means that I get to call myself professor and I get library access. It's wonderful. Um, but really, like I like doing audio commentaries
Hmm.
and things like that that are a little bit more contained. But yeah, like I said, you're the exception that proves the rule. Always
Well,
happy to chat.
I'm so happy to talk to you. And I how is it? How is the translation of I've heard you talk about 1000 Women in Horror as the book itself, a departure from a lot of your other writing, which has more of a distinctly academic bent to it in its kind of language and presentation. Whereas I've read you talk about 1000 Women in Horror as a real expansion of your voice. Like you emphasizing like, I'm not dumbing this down for more people. I'm making my work more expansive in its accessibility. And now I feel like we level up that expansiveness even more with a video treatment format in the documentary. How did you feel about the translation process from one more populist style to kind of an even more so one with the doc?
It's so important, and it really goes back to those origins that we've been talking about with those earlier books. So I did my master's in 2007 on rape revenge film, and I came from a music journalism background, and I just spent 2 years
Just a Gen
laboring
X
over.
music journalist. Just a Gen X
Right,
music
right. What we
journalist.
need more of, oh God. So recovering music journalist, recovering academic. Um, so I've been used to writing and having people read my work. You know, that's the
Hmm.
one thing with music journalism is that at least people read it. And then
Right.
suddenly I pivot to academia, and I've spent years working on this research project, and then two people read it, and my
Right.
ego was devastated. It's like two people, come on, like
Yeah.
like I get a gig review and I get a couple of hundred people minimum. Like this is insane. So
Yeah.
I pivoted from basically translating my master's thesis into a book. So even before I did a PhD, it was like, okay, I want people to read this.
Mm.
And it's not like I want academics to read this. I want 15-year-old boys to read this.
Yeah.
I'm much more interested in talking to young men who watch these films about rape revenge films. That's
Hmm.
much more interesting to me than talking to 50-year-old academics who have already made up their minds.
Hmm.
So this process of translation's always been really central, I think, to my practice, for want of a better word. And I often have academics sort of saying to me, how do you, there is an assumption and quite an arrogant one, I think,
Mm.
that, how do you kind of dumb down or translate
Yeah.
academic work for a public facing audience, for Fangoria or for an audio commentary or,
Hmm.
for a podcast. And it's like, well, it's not dumbing down. Like
Hmm.
you're not the gatekeepers. You don't own this kind of knowledge. It's really about, to me, what's important is about accessibility of ideas.
Hmm.
Like that's how we have conversations about things that really matter. And really the process with 1000 Women in Horror, just the origins of the book and then adapting that to a documentary. It was really about I didn't want to kind of mollycoddle people that were already, have a PhD on
Yeah,
feminist film theory. That's
totally.
not who I'm interested in talking to. I'd rather talk to 15-year-old boys. And that's
Hmm.
not to say that it's dumbed down, but it's really important to me that these conversations are accessible
Hmm.
for
I feel like
everybody.
that is, I feel like that's part of the testament to like Carol J. Clover's Men, Women, and Chainsaws. I feel like why that has the name recognition that it does is because when you're reading it, it's like reading a movie critic talking about all these things and doesn't feel like you need to have taken a 300 course in something else to really be discussing it. It's not quite Donna Haraway. You're not trying to
Right,
crack the
right, right.
cyborg manifesto. You feel like you could recommend that to anybody and they could be like, hell, I read it like partly as a beach read and it functions
Right.
that way.
It's a fun book, and I think Clover's a really great example because I think the things that people kind of forget about Men, Women, and Chainsaws, and perhaps the stuff that hasn't aged that well, is the very dated psychoanalytic theory.
Sure, yeah.
And you can kind of read the book and just ignore that.
Yeah,
The thing that is so important about that book, aside from the sophistication of the ideas, which obviously have had an impact that is indescribable. Every film academic, every film
right.
critic dreams of having the kind of legacy that Carol J. Clover has. But I think the thing that's so important about that book is that it's just so joyful.
Hmm.
There's such a glee and such a delight and such passion and enthusiasm, and it's critical and it's smart, but it's not this sort of holding the text at arm's distance, this sort of objective, clinical sort of study. It's not
Hmm.
this surgical breakdown. There's a real joy there, and it's like a frisson, like, and you feel it bouncing off the page when she talks about Carrie, when she
Hmm.
talks about Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. It's like
Hmm.
she's this incredibly smart woman. Her background wasn't film. Her background, I think, was in Scandinavian medieval poetry. I'm going from
Wow.
memory there. I could be wrong. She doesn't come from a film theory background. She was
Yeah.
like a medievalist, I believe, and specifically around Scandinavian history. And she wrote that book because she was a single mom and her kid was into horror.
Hmm.
And so that joy, she just adopted the joy from her child and went with it. And I think it's like a testament to single motherhood, to
Hmm.
multi-skilling, to joy. Like and I there are things in that book that I don't agree with, like really
Hmm.
quite staunchly, but who cares? Like that's the point. She
Hmm.
wanted to start a conversation, and she did with enormous scope and with an enormous impact, and an impact that I just don't know has been paralleled really by many other people in horror specifically.
Hmm. Well, I feel like a movie, I'm gonna transition to your movie pick, which I
Mhm.
feel like its impact for this modest movie from the dawn of the new millennium, I feel like it's ripple out among, it's one of those movies that really, I feel like benefited from the proliferation of social media and people being able to be like, hey, I really like this movie. And then suddenly it catches on a tweet or it catches on a post on Instagram. And then suddenly there's this groundswell to where like, I feel like it is a true kind of cult piece that actually has what I think has achieved close to a level of mainstream recognition. I guess at least mainstream among like people who are dig genre movies, which is I feel
Absolutely.
like it epitomizes like I feel like it's this Gen X beating heart. This movie is so fucking 90s. It comes out in 2001, but you can feel it having gestated in the prior temperament and style of the decade before it. Tell us about your relationship, your sort of broad strokes with May. Lucky McKee's May.
So I discovered May a couple of years after it came out. This was sort of in the dying days of the video shop. Well, I guess by then
Mm,
it was like the DVD shop.
yeah.
And my partner at the time would be infuriated with me because I was one of these people that would take 4 hours to choose three films. Like I just
Yeah.
labored.
Yeah.
And so what I decided to do for the sake of domestic harmony was to alphabetically go through the horror section. So they had a
Okay.
deal which was like seven DVDs for $7 for 7 days. So I
Uh-huh.
would just literally go in and just take a chunk of seven, bring them back and that was really horror boot camp for me in a
Uh-huh.
way. Um, and that's how I discovered May. I knew nothing about it. I'd heard nothing about it. It was just sort of it just came to me in one of these sort of sessions, and it was like being struck by lightning. Like it
Yeah.
was really, I was just so moved by this film. I thought it was deeply intelligent, deeply beautiful, like really genuinely moving, such confident filmmaking, such an extraordinary performance. And it's like, this is horror. This is what horror is. This is what
Hmm.
horror does. And this was back around the time that I was sort of doing my early sort of, my honors
Mm.
masters, sort of very early in my academic career when I thought that I would have an academic career. And it just hit all, this is like a couple of, maybe 5 or 6 years after I'd read Men, Women, and Chainsaws for the
Mm.
first time. So it really hit all those sort of sweet spots. That being said, as I've aged and, we all live lives,
Yeah.
May has become, and this is really the reason why I chose it,
Mm.
May has become a film that I have a very different relationship from that kind of objective admiration,
Mm.
in that for me, May feels like a documentary about what being undiagnosed autistic is for a femme identifying person. Like it
1000%. You
really,
you cannot
like,
watch this movie in 2026 and not think this woman is undiagnosed. And if she had
right.
found her diagnoses and also her kink community at some
Oh
point,
my God.
she probably could have put all this somewhere that was totally
So
sustainable.
the film is so much about, quite explicitly about May wanting to feel seen.
Yeah.
Vision, and it's made really clear, especially in the beautiful finale.
Hmm.
Um, it's all about her wanting to be seen. And the irony is that I don't think I've ever felt more seen by a film than I have May.
Mm.
Not to like I had an exact, it's not like a direct, oh, that happened to me, but
Hmm.
the emotion and the feeling of the film, and her place in the world, and the way that she misreads cues, like it's
Hmm.
just extraordinary. And Lucky has said that, he really based May on himself,
Hmm.
that he really, so this, the gendering of May, I think, is very fluid,
Hmm.
which it was quite unusual for the time. And I don't think
Yeah.
it was like capital F fluid
No.
consciously like that. I think the way that it deals with sexuality is really extraordinary. I just don't know how anybody could have made a documentary. Sorry, I don't know how anybody could have made. Actually, yeah, I'll stick with it. I don't know how anybody could have made a documentary about being a femme identifying autistic person and have done it better than May. I mean, this was a time when women and girls weren't really diagnosed with autism. It was
Hmm.
very much, common. The common wisdom was that it was boys.
Yeah.
Girls weren't really autistic.
Hmm.
And this film was so far ahead of the curve on that front.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is that if you watch the film, I think through a kind of lens of neurodiversity, the last third of the film is when May pops a cog. She's
Hmm.
like, okay, she cracks, and she just decides to focus on her obsessive interest,
Yeah.
and you can see the emotional regulation. She actually just becomes confident and she becomes calm.
Hmm.
The unfortunate part is that her autistic obsession is cutting people up and sewing them together.
Yeah.
I'm not recommending that. But it's like this is what happens to an autistic person when they're allowed to kind of indulge in their autistic obsessions, and they just sort of come into themselves. Ideally, it should not have a body count.
Yes.
I'm just put
Yes.
it, that feels that it needs
Absolutely.
to be said, but I do feel, yeah, this is a girl living her life with her autistic obsessions after repressing it and after masking. And
Hmm.
I mean, I can talk about this film endlessly, as you can probably tell. You probably have questions and I'm not giving you a chance to.
Well, you even see the lightly at the beginning, you like before the sort of cold open when you just see Meg bleeding from an eye and screaming, then we cut back to her childhood and you even see the social indoctrination most heavily by her mother of don't be yourself, be something people will like. And it is like you see it from the very beginning, and I was so having just watched A Thousand Women in Horror right before watching
Right.
this, like to see the chapter really that movie, the documentary is kind of broken down into these chapters in a way of like the stages of a girl to a woman. There is girlhood, there is school years and adolescence, there's women in the workplace, there's the old, there's the hag, the crone, like the older woman. And a key part of the sort of young girl chapter of the documentary talks about the role of dolls in horror and the role of dolls in developing girls. And this movie begins with doll parts literally raining down on the screen through the intro. I was like, we are being served up 1000 Women in Horror right before our eyes.
I have a major obsession with dolls in horror. It's like and it's been, I think I'm coming up to about 17 years now that I've been collecting films. I have an insane autistic spreadsheet on the topic.
Hmm.
I'm obsessed. And for me, that part of the documentary, especially where I talk about Claudia in Interview with the Vampire,
Mm.
I think that I love Interview with the Vampire, but for me, Claudia and the dolls is
Hmm.
is just so bad. I think it's my favorite part of the whole film is the
It's
relationship that
the
she
most
has with
provocative
dolls.
part of that
It
movie.
really is.
Is her just her fury that she will never be a woman, and the coveting of women for that reason, and that, like, not in a similar vein of like a realignment of an anger and a passion and a feeling that cannot be properly exercised, and so she becomes a girl child woman who kills.
Right. What I think is so interesting, and it ties into Claudia, I think, as much as it does to May, although May makes it more explicit.
Mm.
And it's certainly one of the things about May in particular that spoke to me the most directly is this fear of being weird. And
Yeah.
again, it's a very autistic experience. And one of the things that I love about May, one of the most compelling parts of May is that she's trying to she's got this crazy crush on this hot Jeremy Sisto
One
mechanic.
of the great beauties of that day,
Just
the
amazing.
crushability of Jeremy
Just
Sisto and his sweet baritone.
and his little Dario Argento fan art, like just such a great character. And I just the perfect actor in the perfect role. And same with Angela Bettis as well. But he's like this kind of alternative guy who's into like horror and stuff,
Hmm.
and he likes weird chicks.
Hmm.
And the word weird is used a lot in May. And what
Yeah.
what becomes apparent is that he likes May because she's weird, but then he realizes that she's the wrong kind of weird.
Yeah.
And she can't process that. She's like,
Hmm.
"But I thought you liked weird."
Hmm.
But he likes mall goth weird. He likes
Yeah.
hot topic
He likes
weird.
cute weird.
Right. And she's, Aimee weird rather
Uh-huh.
than May weird. And she can't process that.
Yeah.
There's like, I finally met somebody who likes weird, but he doesn't like my kind of weird. And I
Hmm.
think that with Claudia, it's the same thing. It's this weirdness. Like, why can't I be a woman? You
Hmm.
keep, you make me a doll. You keep giving me dolls. You treat me like the doll of our little found family.
Hmm.
And that's really weird. And
Hmm.
that weirdness is driving me to homicidal mania, which it does with May as well. I think that there's less of a kind of, I think that Claudia is less autism coded than
Yeah,
May.
sure.
But I think this question of weirdness, and I think dolls really, because dolls are the epitome of not being weird,
Hmm.
that they're a beautiful object for girls and women and feminine identifying folk to kind of tease out these ideas of the idealized vision of femme presentation.
Well, and thinking about it, like after watching 1000 Women in Horror and then putting on May again, there, like, a thing that you said in the documentary is that like dolls are like girls' first lesson in objectification, like
Right.
as little petite female thing, feminine thing, as possession that you make up and you make pretty and you do what you want with it. And it, like, thinking of that as I'm watching May and how the movie crescendos. For guys, the movie May, I should tell you about it. May is about a woman who she's the eponymous character. She's a titular role. She works in an animal hospital, and she is sort of at the very beginning of her life. She has the struggle of she has a lazy eye, so she has this thing that makes her different physically, in addition to like in her interior with this neurodivergent difference that she has, and she grows up a bit of an odd bird, a bit of an outcast. And as we learn over the movie, May's predilections include the true grotesque: bodies, blood, animals in pieces, things that hew toward the violent. And as she encounters people who start drawing out sexual and romantic feelings in her, it seems like kind of for the first most potent time in her life, she starts having to confront the dissonance between the things that people say and the things that people mean. And I'm assuming a very literal mind such as hers, when people are not literally telling you the truth of how things are supposed to work and how you're supposed to feel. And as you said, that drives her to a homicidal kind of mania. And it is that the performance that Angela Bettis is giving is so snapped into focus the moment May really starts indulging her autistic obsession. And there's an ease about her, there's a clarity of her movement and her purpose. And you're like, you realize what Angela Bettis has been doing the entire time, the whole rest of the movie. And it is a Hall of Fame performance
I
in
mean,
the genre, no question.
it's up there with Isabella Gianni in Possession for me. Like, and
Hmm.
that's no exaggeration. I think
I'm
it's
with you.
that caliber. I think it's and look, the collaborative relationship between Lucky McKee and Angela Bettis.
Hmm.
We talk film crit. We often default to auteur theory. You know, that the
Hmm.
director is the author of the text, and we don't perhaps debate that as much as we used to, or perhaps as much as we should have. But I think that the relationship between Bettis and McKee is a really fascinating one to look at it just in terms of the gendering of filmmaking,
Hmm.
this idea of authorship. They followed this film up. So there was May in 2001, 2002, and I think it was 2006. They did a film together called Roman,
Hmm.
which is like the flip side to May. It's like the other side of the coin, which Angela Bettis directed and Lucky
Mm.
McKee starred in.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's a great film. I mean, Lucky is an incredible actor. I believe, I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that Lucky is actually in May. He's the guy in the elevator snogging the girls.
Oh, okay, great.
But I love the idea of Bettis moving behind the camera and McKee moving in front of the camera for the story of Roman. And
Hmm.
Roman is, he's got his own story. He similarly has some issues going on that perhaps fall into the neurodiverse ballpark.
Hmm.
But I love that. I think there's just it's a beautiful collaborative spirit. But I think in terms of experimenting with authorship, with collaboration, I
Hmm.
just think what beautiful people. And this is one of the delights of low budget indie filmmaking is that it gives people the opportunity to do that. And Roman, the relationship between Roman and May, I think, is not as known as it could be. And I do think that
Yeah, I would say
you know,
no.
right, it's beautiful. Like it's a beautiful little synchronicity there. And I think that it's such a lovely project and it speaks so highly, uh, just as people, I think, of Bettis and McKee, like that's how they approach making films together. I think it's really beautiful.
I can't think of many filmmakers, many dudes, beyond Lucky McKee, to where I'm sincerely interested in their presentation of the interior life of a female protagonist. Like, not that like I hate all the other, but like if I know it's a Lucky McKee movie, I'm like, I am so interested to see his insight on the most likely female protagonist that we're going to have. And I think two of his Masters of Horror segment, Sick Girl, that is
Right.
about a lesbian couple. One of them, I think, is an entomologist and meets a weird little artist in like the lobby of a building, and they become girlfriends, and people become bugs, and there's, insemination, pregnancy, that kind of thing. But like, it is such a, I watched that. I remember the first time I saw that, it felt like such an extension of the same kind of philosophy and spirit that I find in May, that it just like, it wasn't like, this is not a quirk in his filmography. This is not a one-off. It's not like who's it? Did Tony Scott make The Hunger? It's not like he made The
Right,
Hunger and
right.
then like everything else was Days of Thunder, which is so amazing, but you're like, shit, you started with The Hunger? Like, I kind of wish you had like nine more hungers that you did. Like, that was a great idea. But like, what you find in May is so representative. One of my other favorite movies of ever is All Cheerleaders Die, a Lucky
That's a
McKee
great
special.
film. Yep.
And you, like, take it from weird girl working at the vet hospital who likes to interact with like the insides of pets, and take it to hot cheerleader girls. Like, there's such a gambit that he runs, and yet you never feel like you fall on that feel bad, gotta take a shower after side of like exploitative leering at a woman's body. It never seems to get there, and that's just really thrilling.
And look, again with that collaborative spirit, the way that he works with actors,
Hmm.
I guess all of this sort of peaks in The Woman.
Hmm.
with Pollyanna McIntosh, which for me is sort of it's such a logical progression for where his films were going.
Mm.
And that film was very controversial. And even now I still meet people that are like that film, nah, like
Mm.
can't do it.
Mm.
A lot of people find it very upset. And look, it is a really distressing film. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to underplay it. Like, I think you write a couple of books on rape revenge film and you perhaps get a little thicker skin than you perhaps should in terms of
Sure.
your own humanity. And I need to keep that in check. The Woman is a really difficult film, and it's not a film that would say everybody needs to go out and watch this. May I would say everybody needs to go out and watch this,
Yeah.
but I will fight with a knife in my teeth for The Woman. I think it's a really bold, smart, important, courageous film. Again, it centers just the most unbelievable performance by a woman that is just unparalleled.
Mm.
And it speaks of a truth about gender
Hmm.
that it haunts me. Like it really genuinely haunts me. I find it a really upsetting film.
Hmm.
Like nothing about that film feels exploitative to me.
Hmm. Well, there was something that I, of course, with the scope of cinema knowledge that you have, I wanted to talk to you about sort of the movie's placement in sort of time and space, where
Mm.
it's this, we are like, it's 2001. So movies that will be affected by the post 9/11 grimsploitation tenor, the Michael Bayization and Platinum Dunes stylings of what horror is about to become, the remake in the IP factory that's about to hit big. But we're on that tail end. This is like such an interesting bridge movie. We're on that tail end of the screamified version of horror as well. Kevin Williamson's like gay man, snappy poppy imprint, self-awareness, meta commentary on the genre. So we're coming off a zenith of the teen movie for sure. And then we're about to move in a very different kind of teen movie in the next 10 years. And in the middle, we kind of have this 20 somethings coming of a queer coming of age killer movie where your hero is your antagonist, but also entirely sympathetic. I wanted to hear from you about where this movie sits among its peers when it comes out at this time, because it's
Yeah,
it's
look,
a real rare bird in there.
I think this is such an interesting period of especially American filmmaking, American genre filmmaking, just from a geopolitical perspective.
Hmm.
Because as you said, like in the mainstream at least, like obviously I think the 90s is often reduced to just those big kind of,
Sure.
scream films. And obviously there were films being made in the 90s that were absolutely incredible and
Totally.
groundbreaking and pioneering. But what I think is really interesting is that we had, in terms of like multiplex popcorn movies that you go and see if you were 15, it's very much this kind of postmodern, kind of pre-Buffy,
Hmm.
wink to the camera,
Very much.
like in on the joke, kind of very postmodern,
Hmm.
very, very postmodern. And there's been oceans of ink spilt on precisely that. You have this strange glitch in 1999 when horror suddenly becomes scary again and horror suddenly
Interesting.
becomes serious again and
Yeah.
horror in the mainstream suddenly becomes raw and low budget, and that was the enormous success of the Blair Witch Project.
Right. Yeah.
People weren't prepared, people weren't used to mainstream major horror movies actually being scary anymore.
Yeah. Really
um,
fucking terrifying you.
Right. And it really, and look, I've got a book that's just about to be announced. I have to give my new book a plug.
Please.
It's actually the Blair Witch is one of my all-time favorite horror films. I'm obsessed with it.
Well, and you've
Um,
written on found footage extensively in the past.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But I've always been, this goes back to my roots in music journalism. I've just written a book on the Blair Witch Project soundtrack, which is called Josh's Blair Witch Mix.
Oh, wow.
And the premise, most people don't even know that it exists, but the premise for that soundtrack was that it was a mixtape that was found in Josh's car.
Oh.
So I've written a whole book on it. It's like
Oh,
actually rather than like a kind of novelty gimmick, so it's all like crazy goth and industrial stuff. So it really
mhm.
taps into that zeitgeist,
Yeah.
apocalyptic, end of the world. Columbine happened during this period,
Hmm.
which was tied quite closely to the influence of, Marilyn Manson and things like that,
Absolutely.
KMFDM. So that's what the book's about. So I'm very much in a kind of Blair Witch headspace, but
Mm.
it's really difficult unless you lived through it to explain how absolutely tectonic the change of the Blair Witch
Yep.
project, the change that that brought to what people thought horror was. And again, I'm talking
Because
about
you're still we're
multiplex
still in a
popcorn horror.
pop culture, we're still in a monocultural society. We're still with a
Right. It's
general
exactly
shared
it.
sense of what comes out, what you see, what's in the paper in the section where you look up the showtime. So there's a penetration of it at like a what we would call now like a mimetic, like a memed out level
Right.
that is so
That's exactly it.
massive.
Yep. In the space, I think, between the Blair Witch and its impact and 9/11
Hmm.
and where that sort of led film and the reductive kind of simple history is that sort of kind of inspired a spike of what was called torture porn films. I think it's historically obviously more complicated than that,
Sure.
but if you want like a basic narrative, but in that gap, we have this incredible moment where people didn't really know what was happening. There was this,
Right.
it's the end of the century. We're not really sure what's going on. Blair
Hmm.
Witch has just completely thrown a spanner in the works of what we thought horror was.
Hmm.
So you get films like May, and you get films like Brad Anderson's Session 9, which is also one of my all-time favorite horror films.
And
You
you're
get
also at
these
an era at this
films,
time when the Sundance Film Festival is perhaps at the peak of its powers, and the landscape of independent film is so
right,
incredibly vibrant.
right. So you get these films that at the time they almost felt like anomalies, and people
Hmm.
didn't really, it's not like May was a big hit when it came out. It's not like
Right.
Session 9 was a major hit when it came out. People were really kind of not nervous, but there was sort of almost like an anxiety about we're not really sure what horror is doing now. We,
Yeah.
we don't really, it's like the foundations, the kind of economic foundations and the commercial foundations and the logic of horror
Hmm.
in the mainstream. And again, I'm not talking about, the fabulous kind of, indie films that were being made during the 90s, especially. But in that kind of more mainstream space, I think that there was this period of destabilization and these films kind of emerged from that kind of tension,
Hmm.
not consciously. Like obviously May wasn't made knowing that September 11 was going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, same with Session 9. I'm a little hazy on the dates of Session 9, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's not like these films were particularly prophetic,
Hmm.
but I think that they were picking up a vibe that there was no one behind the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah.
That like there's no trend. Like the Blair Witch, there's no trend. So that obviously found footage became a huge thing.
Hmm.
But really, I mean, after Blair Witch, it really didn't become a big thing until Google bought YouTube in 2005.
Right.
2007, we have Paranormal Activity.
Hmm.
We have things like Rec and
Hmm.
um, Cloverfield. So there's actually quite a big gap between those
That's
films
true. There is like
and the
there
Blair
is a
Witch,
stretch between like when
right?
Blair Witch hits and when it becomes big business.
It almost vanishes for at least 5 years. I mean,
Yeah.
again, very micro budget, amazing films, super interesting films. Read my book if you want to read about these films.
Hmm.
It didn't disappear completely, but in terms of the multiplex, in terms
Hmm.
of like the kind of general cinema literacy, it really kind of went from, from Blair Witch to Cloverfield or Diary of the Dead, the Romero film. There was
Hmm.
actually quite a big jump. So there was this strange period that May and Session 9 and films like that emerged in where, yeah, it felt nobody's behind the wheel. Nobody really knows what the winning formula is right now. And
That
things like you
is.
said, the kind of the Platinum Dunes remake, that kind of IP, that became a pretty steady,
Yeah.
pretty reliable business model and still is.
Hmm.
But it took time. There was like this period of destabilization that I think is really fascinating. And when people talk about that, they usually default to talking about torture porn, which
Hmm.
I certainly don't mean to undermine.
Sure.
And obviously internationally, there were things happening like
The new
the
French
sort of
extremity.
extreme films happening in France.
J
Um,
horror like extreme Asia extreme is doing things we couldn't that would as
right,
they say would kill a Victorian child if
right.
they
It's
saw what Takeshi Miike is doing at the like dawn of the millennium.
exactly. In Australia, we had Wolf Creek. So,
Yes.
internationally interesting things were happening. I certainly don't mean to imply that this was a dead zone for
Mm.
horror. I feel quite the opposite. I actually think it's a really interesting time because the normal commercial rules about what works
Hmm.
just weren't there.
Hmm.
It was like a period without commercial scaffolding. And in those cracks, we get films like May and Session 9, which I do think are not just two of the best horror films of this century. I think they're two of the best horror films ever made.
I think so much it becomes like an obsessive thought of mine that's come up a bunch on this podcast of like what it feels like before 9/11 happened was like what that took from us and the cultural realignment and the nationalistic heteronormativity around
Mm,
that what that took from us was like this decade where there felt like a lawlessness in terms of indie film possibility and new queer cinema, which has come up on this podcast so many times, and
Yep.
what black cinema is putting out at scale and for a incredibly commercially successful audience. And then it's like not and then you get to the end of the decade of the 90s and it's the 2000s. It's like who's behind the wheel? What path are we gonna take? And then 9/11 happens and it's like fuck you. Fuck
R
you. We're putting things
Absolutely.
in boxes. We are going to silo difference out. There is a formula, and it's kind of like the last one what we had, and it's pretty much more vulgar, and it's definitely awesome, but it also sucks in a lot of ways. Like, it is not that that was like the 9/11 awful in so many ways. We think from a cultural standpoint, from a pop
Right.
cultural standpoint, what it seems to have put a hydraulic fucking press on was the like variety of acceptable expression that had become like proliferate in a way like no one was watching. So a bunch of people like shot in the gaps. And it was awesome.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And I think the normalization of surveillance culture, I don't
Absolutely.
think that's separate from what was happening to screen culture.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I was watching a film the other day, and I can't remember what it was. I was watching Ms. 45, which I know is a mutual favorite of both of ours.
Absolutely, yes.
And there's a whole kind of series, a kind of running part of that film is that she chops up a body in her bathtub,
Hmm.
and then she goes out every day with a couple of shopping bags just full of body parts and just deposits them around town.
Yep.
You like it's an old lady, oh, you couldn't do that today. But it's like the thought that there were no surveillance cameras is
Hmm.
just it's I mean, if anything in that film has aged, I would
Hmm.
say it's that the idea that you could just happily catch taxis around New York
Hmm.
unsurveilled,
Uh-huh.
and I think that kind of that I think that surveillance culture brings with it a change in the way
Hmm.
that we think about performance.
Yeah. And I
Not just in terms of screen performance, but in terms of the way that we behave in the world, knowing that there are cameras everywhere.
I am glad that you brought up Miss 45 for the reason of another thing I thought of while I was watching this was I'd been listening to a podcast where you were talking specifically about Miss 45 and you talk about how it was introduced to you inside of sort of that like film bro kind of way of like, hey, but have you seen Miss 45? That like, hey, are you real? Like, are you
Hmm.
hardcore enough? And you talk about like the experience of first watching that included an awareness of being surveilled and how you were perceiving this thing as it's happening. And as I'm watching May and she meets Jeremy Sisto, who's definitely like, oh yeah, I'm cutting off work early to go see Argento. You haven't seen Trauma? Like, and I'm watching this and I'm thinking like, this is also the guy, even if he's a good dude, even, like your friends, like watching this guy at Jeremy Sisto being like, these are the fucking dudes that like, have you ever heard Alexandra Heller-Nicholas into seeing Miss
Right.
45 for the first time?
Right. Like it's almost like thrown down as an edgelord challenge.
Yes.
And that's exactly what he does in May. He shows her
Oh
the
yeah.
the the crappy little horror art film that he made at film school. And it's like a little kind of meet cute. I think it's a couple on a picnic.
Yeah, it looks
And
very
then
like the beginning of like Night of the Living Dead almost, like just
yeah,
two
yep,
very anodyne white folks like in a forested area and they're like having a picnic.
right. And they're making out and then they start cannibalizing each other. And
Yes.
you can see at the start he's watching her. Like you can sort of he's kind of studying her to see her reaction.
Oh yeah.
But because she's a twisted little biscuit, she's really into it. And so
Yeah.
she's sort of looking at him. It's like, are you for real? Are you really this awesome?
Yeah, are you flirting with
Um,
me? Are you flirting with
right,
me right
right. So she basically takes that as a kind of as consent
now?
for blood play,
Hmm.
like and the whole thing really backfires on him
Yeah.
when she starts sort of biting him and smearing herself in blood during an attempt at sex. Like and you can see he's like, this is too weird. And it's
Hmm.
again, it goes back to that, there's different kinds of weird.
Hmm.
And if you're neurodiverse, it's very hard to understand, like, well, if I'm bad weird, what's good weird? Like, what
Uh-huh.
do you mean? It's totally illegible. And I think that kind of edgelord um challenge
Hmm.
that you get with the film bro nerd jocks is really typical of that. Like I know I'm not
Uh-huh.
the only person who's had an experience.
Oh yeah.
with a
The
guy
number
like
of
that.
times
You're
I've
like,
been
oh,
asked if I've seen Cannibal Holocaust though is like, oh my
oh, you
God.
like horror? Have you seen
But
a Serbian
have you
film?
seen a Serbian
Like,
film?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Like,
Yep.
my God, watch another movie. My
Right.
God. It's
Grow
like
up.
just like the perverted version of like Harry Potter fans. Like, watch another movie. My
And
God.
it's like, have you seen Svetlana Baskova's Green Elephant? Like,
Yeah.
let's do it. Let's like, I throw down.
Yeah. Have
I
you seen
throw down
Fat
the
Girl?
gauntlet.
Have you seen Fat
Right.
Girl? Come on. Well, I
Right.
think that I Lucky McKee was on the show and he picked for his character Harvey Keitel in Mean Streets. And I think
Amazing.
that's so he like really identified with this like he's absolutely aware of like the dangerous track of masculinity and wanting to try and keep peace amid like this chaos of this incredibly like malignant environment and succumbing to those like malignant impulsive thoughts within. And so they're like he has an understanding. He seems to have such a wonderful understanding of each person and empathy for each person he is trying to like skewer as well as each person he's trying to empathize with. And I love
Yep.
that I only have room for a couple more questions, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring up I love that perhaps the most she's a little manipulative. She's a manipulative hot girl. But to me, the most sympathetic character in this movie is Anna Faris as
She's
the
an
hot
I
girl who works at the vet clinic with May and like seduces her to do favors, but like genuinely also seems to like her and is attracted to her.
it's such a really refreshing representation of same-sex attracted
Yeah.
woman. Like it's just, she's a bit of a dizzy slut. And that's fine. Like
Yeah.
that's totally fine. She really likes to fuck. That's totally fine.
Yes.
She's harmless. She's I mean, one of the things I find really interesting is that I don't think that May is queer. I don't think May is bisexual. I think that
Mm.
May, it reminded me of what a friend of mine once said, that her sexual preference is people who fancy her.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
that it's like I don't think that May has any sexual interest in her until she is seduced. And she's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you like me? I'm in." Like,
Yeah.
and I like that ambiguity. I think it's really fun and I think it's really funny. And I like that it's really like it's not like a heavy-handed, here is a queer character. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like May's experimenting with her sexuality. It's just so easy and organic and fun and funny.
Hmm.
The Ambrosia, the girlfriend that she gets later in the film, is
Yes.
really she's barely on screen, but she's one of the most fantastic like dyke bitches in film
Yeah.
history. She's wonderful. She should have her own spin-off series. She's incredible.
Well, I have to pick a concluding question. This is good. This has lasted like 5 minutes. I've been only talking to you for like 5 minutes, but I guess what I will wrap it with is I just wanted to hear you speak a bit about the grand finale of this movie and May building her perfect person who, thank God to her, you don't have to talk. I don't have to talk to you. And she takes these component parts from all these side characters that we have met throughout the movie to make her perfect companion. And I wanted to hear from you about the construction of Amy, of Dark
Yeah.
May, and where that cooperates with the doll trope within horror and the progression of the female in their horror narrative.
Look, I think it's a really lovely, and this taps into the documentary, but it's like all roads seem to always lead back to Mary Shelley. You know,
Goddamn right. Yes.
right? Like, I think it's April who calls her like Mary Shelley was goth as fuck. Like
Yes. Yes. I
all
believe that
roads
is
lead back to
exactly who
Mary
says that.
Shelley. And May, it's like it's inevitable that all roads will lead back to Mary Shelley. Roger Ebert wrote a really lovely review about May, and he described the ending. For those of you who haven't seen it, spoiler, but it's like a 25-year-old film, grow up.
Yeah.
The basically she makes this kind of human Frankenstein doll,
Hmm.
and she cries because it can't see her. It's
Hmm.
inanimate, and she's like, I just want somebody to see me, and she's
Hmm.
weeping. And the last shot of the film is the hand, Adam's hand, like touches her cheek.
Hmm.
And Ebert wrote, it's a film that earns the right to its ending. And I think that's exactly it. In any other filmmaker's hands, in any other movie, it would be so hokey and corny
Hmm.
and tacky. And there's something about the emotional journey of May that it absolutely works. It's a film that absolutely earns the right to that ending. It's exactly the perfect ending for that film. And I think it's perfect, both the Mary Shelley, but also like May is finally seen. You know,
Hmm.
this girl is like surrendered to her autistic obsessions. She's emotionally regulated. Give a girl a break. Just give her a break.
And I mean, and May puts it on the line for Amy the doll as well. She takes out her own eye and puts it in one of Amy's sockets, and just that detail, like she presses her face against the doll head and her own eye just falls on her, like just like sadly just
The way that it
tumbles.
sort of rolls down the cheek is just so
Yeah.
grim.
It's so much. And like you see that before you see the hand come around, like the arms of a guy she met at the bus stop with Adam's perfect hands attached to them, and he puts his hand across and just strokes her cheek, and you just see the faintest smile, and then that's the end of the movie.
It is. And it's like, look, that was really the only good thing about Adam anyway. Like, if we're to be honest,
Yeah.
like, you know, she got what she wanted. You know,
Hmm.
she was a girl who just wanted to be seen, and she found a way to be seen. Perhaps not the most constructive or legally sound way, but she got there. She got there.
Well,
She earns the
Alex,
right to it.
thank you so much for bringing this as your feeling scene pick, and for coming on the show, for doing a podcast, for visiting with me, and giving me the honor of getting to talk to you about a horror movie, which is just always a privilege.
I could talk to you for many more
I
hours.
know.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much.
Maximum Fun.
A worker-owned network.
Of artist-owned shows.
Supported
Directly
by you.